day, everybody, and welcome to our Give to Get session for today and our Mindset Mastery session for today. Hope everybody's having a wonderful day and going to enjoy this as we go forward. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics and one of what I'll say my most fascinating topics, and that is self-confidence. Why is it that some people seem to have what I'll say buckets and buckets and buckets full of self-confidence, almost like they got so much self-confidence, they could probably even share some of it around. And some other people, what I'll say, struggle even to get what I'll say a little bit or a small semblance of self-confidence. Why is it that other people, it seems like the self-confidence never escapes them no matter what situation they're in? And other people, the self-confidence is very fleeting. And in some situations, they're feeling self-confident, and in others, it quickly dissipates. Those are all the things that we're going to be talking about today, because I want you to stop and think for a moment. When are you at your best? You are probably at your best when you are, quote unquote, feeling self-confident. You're feeling like you can accomplish what it is you're set out to accomplish. You have confidence in going and doing what you want to do, need to do from that point of view. You've got a plan on how to go do it. So we're going to be talking about self-confidence today, and I'm going to share one thing right now, and that is self-confidence can be built. It's not whether you have it or whether you don't have it, whether in some situations you have it, in other situations you don't. Self-confidence can actually be built, much like building a house. And I like to use self-confidence almost like the foundation of a house. The more you build that rock solid foundation of a house, the more you can build a stronger house up top. And, one level, two levels, three levels from that point of view. Where if the foundation is shaky, then the house is going to be shaky on top of that foundation. So I want to walk you through the self-confidence or the principles of self-confidence today as we go forward. So here it is, okay? The moment anyone becomes more consciously competent, okay, in any activity, in any subject, in any topic, in any, what I'll say, arena and or situation, the moment anyone becomes more consciously competent, they automatically, and I want you to hear my words, they automatically become more self-confident. The moment they become more self-confident, they automatically expect more of themselves. They automatically believe in themselves more, and therefore automatically they go and perform better, or they perform at a higher level, or they perform at levels that they've never performed at before. I really want you to understand it. It all starts right down at the bottom of, quote unquote, increasing your conscious competence. Well, what does really increasing your conscious competence mean? It really means increasing your level of awareness in a topic, in a situation, in an event, dealing with people from that point of view. And as you're increasing your awareness, quote unquote, you're becoming more consciously competent, whether that be through a book, whether that be through a podcast, whether that be through a seminar that you went through, a whole bunch of number of areas of, improving your conscious competence. And it's so valuable because the moment you increase your level of awareness, increase your level of conscious competence, you automatically become more self-confident. You automatically have higher expectations of yourself. You automatically perform at a higher level. So let's go look at what this looks like. We've talked about performance before. Here's the performance equation. If you've seen any of my, what I'll say, talks before, I'm very much what I call a performance junkie. I love to look at situation. I love to look at people. I love to break down and dissect, I'll say, the element of performance in a situation, in an environment with a particular individual from that point of view, because it's all about driving your performance. Because when you drive your performance, things happen. And again, your performance you can control. We're not talking about results here. We're talking about performance. So your performance is a combination of talent times habits times the opportunity, the environment that you've got in front of you. And the more that you can increase your talents and or increase your habits and or increase the environment, the opportunity in front of you, you're going to drive performance to a higher level. So then where does what I'll say self-confidence come into the picture when we talk about performance? We just went through on our last slide that as we become more consciously competent, automatically our self-confidence goes up. Then automatically our expectations go up. Then automatically our performance goes up. So what's the link to performance? Well, it's simple as this. Self-confidence determines expectations. The more self-confident you are, the more that's going to increase the expectations that you have of yourself. And so really where your level of self-confidence is determines where and how and what you expect of yourself. On a simple scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high, if we had a self-confidence of 1, we would have an expectation of a 1. If we had a self-confidence of 5 out of 10, we'd have an expectation 5 out of 10, if you could actually measure something that way. Likewise, if we had a 10 out of 10 self-confidence, we'd have a 10 out of 10 expectations. It's simply that easy. So self-confidence determines expectations. So again, what's the link to performance? Because at the end of the day, it's all about how we perform. Well, that's pretty easy too. Expectations dictate performance. So again, if we think about the last slide, the moment I become more consciously competent, my self-confidence goes up. The moment my self-confidence goes up, my expectations go up. The moment my expectations go up, the more I quote unquote perform at a higher level. So again, that's where I said self-confidence is down at the bottom, i.e. the foundation from that point of view to help you build this incredible, I'll say, foundation to go build the house on that will never, what I'll say, vary or waver or quote unquote escape you. So self-confidence determines expectations. Expectations dictate performance. So therefore, the moment I become more confident around my talent, my expectations of my talent's going to go up, my performance of my talent's going to go up. The moment I become more confident with my, I'll say, attitude and effort, i.e. my habits, the more my expectations are going to go up, the more my performance is going to go up around my effort and attitude, i.e. my habits. The moment I'm more confident in the opportunity, the more I'm confident in the environment, the more I'm confident with the teammates that I'm playing with, my expectations are going to go up, therefore my performance is going to go up. So this is how self-confidence down at the bottom, building that foundation, relates not only to the expectations that you have of yourself, but then again, how you go perform.
On a scale of 1 to 5, would you give yourself a 5 on achieving what you want in life? If your answer is anything less than a 5, right now, I have something awesome for you. Achieving your goals and living your life at a 5 isn't easy. Most people aren't prepared to focus, stay disciplined, and do the everyday work that is necessary to achieve amazing results. But since you're watching this, then I'm guessing that you're not one of those people. And this is an opportunity that will change your life. Give to Get is a global program that brings together world-class coaching and combines it with empowering masterminds and networking opportunities. We provide 5-star guidance for the price of a cup of coffee a day. To find out more, click on the link in the description of this coaching session.
And it all starts again with conscious competence. So let's start to take a look at where that really kind of breaks out. Here's what we call the learning model when it comes to self-confidence. And you can see in the top left-hand corner, it all starts with awareness. That's exactly what I'll say conscious versus unconscious is all about, is your level of awareness. I always like to say the first step in any kind of change, the first step in any kind of improvement, the first step in any kind of, growth is your awareness. The moment your awareness starts to move, the moment your awareness starts to change, the moment your awareness starts to grow, this is what triggers everything else to follow. And so what we're talking about here is on the first one, where you see the first Roman numeral 1 on the top left-hand corner, somebody that is consciously competent and consciously incompetent. What we're talking about here is somebody that's highly aware of themselves completely, meaning they're consciously competent. They learn from what they do well and they know what they do well. You can have a conversation with these people and they will absolutely tell you what they do well. They're also equally consciously incompetent, meaning they learn from what they don't do well. And they're highly aware of what they don't do well. And if you had the conversation with them, they could very much walk you through that. We like to say in that model, that individual is getting what we call full learning. They're learning from what they do well. They're learning from what they don't do well. They're consciously aware of what they do well. They're consciously aware of what they don't do well. They're consciously competent, which is another way of saying it. They're consciously incompetent. And because of that, they get full learning. Okay. How we describe these individuals from a self-confidence point of view, not from a personality trait, not from how they interact with people, but purely from a self-confident point of view, we call these individuals self-confident, meaning they've got a self-confident confidence model, if that makes sense. I'm going to say that again. They have a self-confident confidence model. Okay. How you can, what I'll say, identify these people, or what it would be like to sit down and talk with these people. It's a very pleasant conversation because when you ask them what they do well, they can tell you. They're very comfortable to tell you what they do well. They're very comfortable to tell you not only what they do well, but the reason that they do well. They can link all of that. Why? Because they're learning from it all the time. Having said that too, they're equally, what I'll say, comfortable to tell you about what they don't do well. Why? Because they're highly aware of it and they learn from that as well too. So it's a very, what I'll say, pleasant conversation to talk about what they do well and what they don't do well. Okay. Next is the individual in that box number 2, Roman numeral 2. That person is consciously confident and unconsciously incompetent. Like the individual up in box 1, they're very consciously competent. So they learn from what they do well because they're highly aware of what they do well. They're unconsciously incompetent, so they don't learn from what they don't do well because they're unconsciously competent. Another way of saying that is they're not aware of what they do well. They're highly aware of what they do well. They're not highly aware of what they don't do well. So learning solely comes from what they do well. And we call that half learning, meaning they're only learning from the things that they do well, and they're missing the opportunity learning from the things that they don't do well. And when we go to characterize, what I'll say, their self-confidence, again, we're not characterizing the person, we're not characterizing the personality, we're characterizing the self-confidence. We call that an arrogant self-confidence. Again, not that the person's arrogant themselves, not that they have an arrogant personality, that there is an arrogance around their self-confidence, meaning they're highly aware of what they do well. So when you talk to them, much like you talk to the self-confident person, and they talk very much about what they do well, and they talk equally comfortably about what they quote unquote don't do well, these people are very comfortable to talk about what they do well because they're very aware of what they do well. When you go to talk with them about things that they don't do well, that's a little bit of a different story. Why? Because they're not consciously competent and they're not highly aware of what they don't do well. So it's not that they're trying to deny it. It's not that they're trying to, what I'll say, get away from it. It's just they're not aware. So when you go there, because you might be observing them from a distance, they're not going to go there with you in that conversation, or they're not going to be comfortable going with you in that conversation because they're not aware. It's not good. It's not bad. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's simply, that's what happens. Why? Because they are not aware of what they don't do well. Similar into what we call box 3, this is the opposite of box 2. We've got somebody who's unconsciously competent, much like the individual up in box 1, who's, what I'll say, we've got somebody who's unconsciously competent and somebody who's consciously incompetent. You've got this individual who's consciously incompetent, much like the person in the box up in number 1, that they learn from what they don't do well. These people are highly aware of what they don't do well. They're unconsciously competent. They're not aware of what they do well. So, like the arrogant model, learning is only happening from half the things or half the time, meaning they learn very well from what they do not do well. They don't learn from what they do well because they're not aware of it. So when you go have a conversation with these people, they will give you a long list of things that they don't do well. When it comes time to having conversations with them about what they do well, and you put it in front of them, again, they're not going to go there with you because they're not aware of it. And so we characterize that self-confidence model. We're not, again, characterizing the individual or the person. We characterize their self-confidence as a self-doubter or a self-doubting self-confidence. Okay. Let me go back to the arrogant for a little bit as well, too. And again, arrogant self-confident model, not arrogant individual. If you're going to have a conversation with that individual, you might walk away from that conversation feeling like that person believes that they do everything well. And you're probably right with that because they're consciously competent. They're unconsciously incompetent. They're not aware of what they don't do well. And so when you attempt to go there, that's difficult for them to go. So you might walk away thinking, you know what, that person thinks that they do everything well. It's one of the reasons why we call it an arrogant self-confidence model. Likewise, when you're talking with the self-doubter, you might walk away from that conversation. Excuse me as I take a drink here. You might walk away from that conversation thinking that, wow, that person doesn't believe in themselves that much. That person doesn't think they're very good. That person, quote unquote, might be a little hard on themselves. Okay. And again, the reason for that is they're highly aware of what they don't do well. They're not aware of what they do well. How you can recognize these individuals, you might be talking about a particular situation or a particular event or a particular activity. I always like to talk about selling because I've spent a lot of time with salespeople. And for argument's sake, we might have somebody who has a self-doubting self-confidence, and you talk to them about, what they do well in selling. And while they might be good at closing, they might be good at presentations, they might be good at, I'll say, asking the right questions, they might be good at prospecting, yet they might struggle with handling objections. That's what they focus on. That's where the majority of their awareness goes. And they literally, or a lot of times, make a comment like, simply because they don't handle objections well, they say, I'm not a good salesperson. Okay. Likewise, you've got the arrogant individual who might have the exact same thing. They might be great at closing. They might be great at handling objections, they might be great at the presentations. They might be great at prospecting, but they might not be very good at handling objections. And when you have the conversation with them, I'm a fantastic salesperson. I'm good at everything. Okay. And again, when I'm making those comments, I'm wanting you to understand that it's from a self-confidence model. It's not the personality as well. Okay. And then you've got what I'll say level 4. That individual is unconsciously incompetent, unconsciously competent. They're not aware of what they do well. They're not aware of what they don't do well. There's absolutely no learning going on there. And we call it zero learning from that point of view. Again, it's not that they're not intelligent. It's not that they can't do things. It's, again, from an awareness point of view. When we talk about conscious competence versus unconscious competence and vice versa, we're really talking about, again, the level of awareness. And so you might have somebody who's just not highly aware of what they do well, not highly aware of what they don't do well. And so it's very difficult for them to, what I'll say, establish a benchmark for their self-confidence because they're just not aware. Okay. So where do we take this? Going to the next model, okay, we talk about the self-confident individual, and I'm going to highlight with my cursor. So you've got the self-confidence individual right here in the middle, okay, meaning their self-confidence, or how we describe their confidence in the confidence model is they're very self-confident. Okay. They understand what they do well, that's their specific strengths over here, and what their growth opportunities, that's over here. And they understand the relationship back and forth around driving and building a very strong self-confidence that then determines expectations, that then dictates performance, is spending what I'll say 90% of the time over on this side of the equation with things that they do well. It's their strengths. Why wouldn't they spend there? And only 10% of their time over here on this from their growth opportunities. Okay. This becomes very apparent when you look at what I'll say professional athletes. Okay. Professional athletes typically are very aware of what they do well, very aware of what they don't do well. And so they'll put themselves into situations, if we were to jump back up here for just a quick second, they put themselves into opportunities here that really maximize their strengths. Why? Because they're highly aware of what they do well here and highly aware of what they don't do well. Okay. For any of the football fans out there, Tom Brady. Tom Brady throws the ball really well. Tom Brady does not run the ball very well. So what kind of offenses do they build around Tom Brady? Ones where he gets to throw the ball a lot and ones where he doesn't have to run that often. Okay. And so if we're looking at Tom Brady here, he'll spend 90% of the time over here throwing the ball because that's his strength. And he'll only spend about 10% over the time here running the ball. Quite frankly, Tom Brady will only run the ball when he has to. Okay. For all you baseball players out there, some batters, quote unquote, bat really well against right-handed pitchers. Some batters don't bat very well against left-handed pitchers. You have that kind of situation, the majority of the time, they're going to go to the plate when they're facing a right-handed pitcher here and not go to the plate that often when they're, what I'll say, facing a left-handed pitcher here. Okay. Because this is what they do well. This is where their strengths come from. This is their growth opportunity. You can see at the bottom, top performers, because again, it's about performance. Top performers focus 90% of their development efforts on leveraging strengths and 10% of their developmental efforts in areas where they are not yet fully competent. This ratio allows them to function with self-confidence. Why? Because 90% of the time they're on the side of the equation where they are focusing on their strengths and they're highly aware of that. Naturally, their self-confidence is going to go up. Why? Because they're spending 90% of the time in areas that they are consciously competent. The moment you become more consciously competent, your self-confidence goes up. The moment your self-confidence goes up, your expectations go up. The moment your expectations go up, your performance goes up. So if that's what's happening with, I'll say, the self-confident individual, what's happening with the arrogant individual? Again, just like the self-confident individual, the arrogant individual has their specific strengths and they're highly aware of them. They're not highly aware of their growth opportunities. Because they're not highly aware of them, they take their specific strengths and they generalize them to 100 and say, I'm good at everything. Because they're not aware of what's going on over here with their growth opportunities. When I say not aware, simply that, they're not aware of it. Okay. And so they need to, what I'll say, start to understand how to move from that arrogant self-confidence model down to a confident or self-confident confidence model. How do you do that? If I'm working with somebody who's got an arrogant self-confidence model, let's just assume I'm working with somebody like that, meaning highly aware of what they do well, not highly aware of what they don't do well. Okay. And I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to spend 90% of the time, I'm going to spend almost 100% of their time over here with their specific strengths until they trust me. I will not go away from their specific strengths, this bubble right here, this ball right here, until they trust me. Once they trust me, then I'll say, hey, how about we go over here and we start to explore some possibilities over here? And if I've done it correctly, and if they truly trust me, they will start to go over here in small pieces. But again, I'm only going to go over here about 10% of their time. Why? Because the majority of their self-confidence is going to come from this side of the equation. Okay? I'll say it again. Top performers focus 90% of their development efforts on leveraging their strengths, while 10% are developing their efforts. In the beginning with the arrogant individual, I'm going to go 90% to 100% on what they do well until they trust me. The inverse of that is happening with the self-doubters. They take the 10% over here that are really growth opportunities for them, and they generalize it to 100% up here going, I can't do anything well. Why? Because they're highly aware of this 10%. They are not highly aware of this 90% over here. So where do they spend the majority of their, what I'll say, mental mind space when it comes to self-confidence? Right here. They spend 90% of the time focusing on the 10% of what I'll say their growth opportunities or areas that are not yet fully competent. Okay, it's very painful to watch this with self-doubters because their self-confidence is taking such a beating. Okay, so when I work with what I'll say a self-doubter up here, again, okay, I'm going to, what I'll say, go with them here for about 10% of the time to get highly aware of what they're, what I'll say, not competent in. And then I'm going to start to put examples over in this ball over here of what they do well. And I'm talking real life examples that they cannot argue with. Whether that be statistical, what I'll say, results, whether that be testimonials from other people, whether that be comments, compliments from other people, that they just can't ignore it. Because that's where and how I'm going to build them up here. Okay. Now, for any of you business owners out there or anybody that does any kind of hiring, okay, let's assume for a moment we're hiring for a particular position and we've got 3 people coming through the door. One's the self-confident individual, highly aware of what they do well, highly aware of what they don't do well. The other is the arrogant, what I'll say, self-confident model, highly aware of what they do well, not highly aware of what they don't do well. And then the third is the self-doubting confidence, where highly aware of what they don't do well, not highly aware of what they do well. Who would you hire first? Well, the simple answer to that is we hire the self-confident individual first. Absolutely. Why? Because they understand this ratio of focusing 90% of the time on their strengths and 10% of the time on their growth opportunities. They understand that. They've already got it. Who do we want to hire second? The quote unquote arrogant, self-confident individual or the self-doubting, self-confident individual? I get a lot of mixed responses here. Okay. The answer is the arrogant individual. A lot of people go, I don't want to hire an arrogant individual. They're arrogant. Okay. It's not so much that the person's arrogant as the self-confidence model is arrogant. But what these people do is they focus 90% of the time on what they do well. They'll get into top performance quite quickly. Why? Because they spend 90% of their time, or quite frankly, 100% of the time on what they do well. So they get into top performance very quickly. And as a leader or as a manager of this individual, what I have to do is spend time with them till they trust me, till they know that I care about them, till they know that I want the best for them. And when we do that, then they're willing to go over onto that other side of their growth opportunities over here and start to increase their level of awareness around their quote unquote growth opportunities. Another way of saying that is increasing their level of awareness around the areas that they're unconsciously incompetent in. And as they do that, learning expands and they start to move into that self-confident individual where they get the full learning. The reason why I'm going to hire the arrogant individual first is exactly that. They're spending 90% of the time on what they do well. If I'm going to hire the self-doubter, they're spending 90% of the time on what they don't do well. That's more of a challenge, and that's a longer term, what I'll say, commitment to take on to get that individual truly up to the self-confident level. Okay. How do we do it in either case, though? And so let's go to the next slide, and that is you pick a skill. Pick whatever skill you want to pick whatever aspect. Again, it can be a skill, it can be anything you want. In this case, I'm choosing communication. And so we're talking about somebody who, I'll say, communicates. We're looking at, again, at the self-confident individual. Well, they're very comfortable. And we start to list all of the different aspects in here of confidence, all the different things. Being a good listener, being able to, what I'll say, repeat what the individual said back. Very much what I'll say, speaking in I feel statements, very much asking a lot of questions. Okay, those are all aspects of a good communicator from that point of view. The self-confident individual will very much fill this box with all those different aspects and be able to tell you what they do very well. They'll also be able to tell you where there's opportunity for growth for them. Again, the arrogant individual will be able to give you all the things that they do well. You might have to help them a little bit with some of the areas, quote unquote, that they're not aware of. Okay. And by doing this, they start to go, oh, again, you're only going to be doing this with the arrogant, self-confident individual if they trust you. If they don't trust you, don't go anywhere near this until you build that trust with them. You first build the trust with them. The self-doubter, again, they're going to give you all the aspects in here that they don't do well. They'll be challenged to do some of the they'll be challenged to give you some of the, what I'll say, aspects, in this case, of communication skills that they do well. This is where you need to help them, what I'll say, fill in this circle of what the aspects that they do well with what I call documented proof or documented evidence. Okay. Statistical analysis, again, compliments from that point of view, testimonials from that point of view, positive reviews, anything like it. Because outside of that, if you don't show them any of that tactile, what I'll say, evidence or anecdotal evidence from that point of view, that might be a better way of saying it, they won't believe you. They will only go there and believe you when you put things in front of them, what I'll say, black and white, that they can't, what I'll say, dispute. So again, let's get back to it. Now you're starting to understand all of this, okay? If you're working with somebody, how can you start to increase their conscious competence? By doing it, you'll automatically increase their self-confidence. Their expectations will automatically increase. Their performance will automatically increase, okay? If you want to do it on yourself, where's areas that you can improve your, what I'll say, conscious competence? Because if you can improve your own conscious competence in anything, well, your self-confidence goes up, your expectation goes up, and your performance goes up, okay? Again, I talk about this all the time when I'm working with salespeople and quote unquote, an attitude, because everybody says you need to have a positive mental attitude in order to be a successful salesperson. Most people would agree with that statement. I don't like that statement because it's too vague, okay? A positive mental attitude. Give me a definition for a positive mental attitude. Okay, it's very ambiguous from that point of view. When I start to say a good professional salesperson needs a confident mental attitude, that's different, because then I can start to ask them, what are you confident in? What are you not confident in? Okay, again, going back to that same example, the self-confident individual will give me both what they're confident in, what they're not confident in. And I'm going to spend 90% of the time working with them on their strengths first. Then I'm going to go to the 10%. The arrogant individual, they're going to start to give me what they do well all the time. And again, I'll go there until they trust me. The self-doubter, they're going to give me all the ones that they're quote unquote consciously incompetent in from that point of view. Okay. From a skill development point of view and from an actual training point of view, I can go there with them, because the moment I start to help them become more skilled at handling objections, or more skilled at closing, or more skilled at asking questions, or more skilled at presentation skills, or more, what I'll say, skills when it comes to communication, or more skills on how to read body language, or more skills on how to read buying signals, or more skills on how to prospect effectively. Anytime I do any of that, they become more consciously competent, which means their self-confidence goes up, which means their expectations go up, which means their performance goes up. Okay? So here's another way of looking at how to do this. So the big yellow arrow up at the top here represents, I'll say, the process that you might want to go through to build a boat, the process on how to become a better salesperson, the process on how to become a better listener, the process on how to become a better communicator, the process on how to become a better business owner, the process on how to become a better leader. Whatever that process is, that's the big yellow arrow. And obviously you're looking to achieve whatever your target or your results are over here. All you want to start at is putting in a quantity of effort, because if you put in a quantity of effort, which is this black box right here, you're going to produce some result, which is this result up here. And when it comes to your quantity of effort, you have 100% control over that. When it comes to actually producing results, you've got very little control over that. Some might even say zero, depending on the situation. Okay, so I don't want to focus where I don't have any control. I want to focus where I have control, especially as a coach if I'm working with people. And so once they put in a quantity of effort here, they produce some result, good, bad, or indifferent. As a coach or a mentor or a leader, I can come in here with regards to the quality, I apologize. With the quality of effort, and I can improve their ability through simple coaching, through simple asking questions, through some simple training. I can, quote unquote, improve their level of ability, i.e., the quality of effort. So the moment I improve the quality of effort, conscious competence goes up, self-confidence goes up, expectations go up, performance goes up. And when I go back here a second time and ask the individual, or the individual goes back there a second time, think about it this way. Their conscious competence is up, their self-confidence is up, their expectations are up, their performance is up, their quantity of effort is going to go to a higher level when they go back to do it a second time. They're going to produce probably a better result than this one they had the last time. And it still affords you the opportunity, or even the individual, to focus on the quality of effort and improve their ability to a higher level. Do that the second time. Now their conscious competence has gone to a second level. Their self-confidence has gone to a second level. Their expectations have gone to a second level, and thus their performance has gone to a second level. And when you come back again to the quantity of effort, now going the third time, it can continue to go to a higher level. And you can literally focus oscillating back and forth between quantity of effort to quality of effort through coaching, mentoring, and or even self-coaching, where you're building conscious competence. Every time you build conscious competence, you're building self-confidence. Every time you're building self-confidence, you're increasing expectations. Every time you're increasing expectation, you're increasing performance. This is why I say again and again and again, self-confidence can be built. We've got to be focused on it. We've got to be targeted on it. And we've got to start to, what I'll say, measure it as well too. So another way of doing it is through self-coaching, asking yourself some coaching questions. So like we did here, you're going to put in a quantity of effort. You're going to focus on the quality of effort. Ask yourself the question, how did it go? Whatever you wanted to accomplish. Again, I'll use the analogy of salesperson. I want to become a better closer. I want to become better at handling objections. I want to become better at asking for the sale. Okay. Even an athlete. I want to hit the baseball better. I want to throw better. I want to run faster. Okay. I want to learn how to tackle better if I'm playing football. Okay. How did that training session go? How did that exercise go? How did that time spent while you were trying to improve the skill go? What went well? What was your execution like? What went well for you? You can ask these questions of yourself, or you can ask somebody to coach you together and ask these questions. How did it go? What went well? As you start to get your answers, how good was your preparation? How good was my preparation? Was I as prepared as I wanted to be? Was I as prepared as I could be? Is there things that I could do to increase or improve my preparation? Okay. What would I do differently the next time? If I was to go back and do that exercise again, what would I do differently the next time based on what I learned doing this way? The moment I do that, I'm improving the quality of the effort. The moment I do that, I'm improving my conscious competence. The moment I do that, I am, quote unquote, increasing my self-confidence. I'm becoming more consciously aware of what I do well, more consciously aware of what I don't do well. My self-confidence is growing, i.e., the foundation to the house is getting stronger. And therefore, my expectations are going to go up. And then, therefore, my performance is going to go up. Okay. What are my next steps? Again, you're right back into preparation. What are my next steps to go back and do that again? Okay. Every day, I shouldn't say every day, 6 days a week, I get up in the morning and I go work out. I'm always looking to improve my workouts. I'm always looking to push my body to a new level. I'm always looking to see how I can work out more efficiently, more effectively from that point of view. I'm always looking to see how I can get stronger. I'm always learning from that point of view. Therefore, what comes up? What my next steps are. What can I do differently the next time? And what are my steps? All the while starting to, what I'll say, drive conscious competence to a higher level. Why? Because I know if I drive conscious competence to a higher level, my expectation goes up. I know if my expectation goes up, or sorry, my self-confidence goes up, my expectations of myself go up. My belief in myself go up. I know if that goes up, I can perform at a higher level. If I'm working with people, one of the reasons why I love to do the coaching that I do, both personally and professionally, is because we start to literally build at this foundation. You get a sense of where the individual is. You get a sense of where their level of awareness is. You get a sense of where their conscious competence is and where their unconscious competence is. You get an idea of where their, what I'll say, conscious incompetence is, where their unconscious incompetence is. And you can start to put together a plan, a program, a model that's going to help them drive their self-confidence. Simply, and again, as you start to do this, it does take time. This is not a quick fix. This is not the self-confidence that you get from different programs that you go to where they say, get up every morning, look in the mirror and tell yourself that you like yourself 5 times. I like myself, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself. And then all of a sudden you get into a situation that you don't know how to handle, and that becomes a very fleeting self-confidence. This is a self-confidence that is built over time, okay? And I say to everybody, it's not a quick fix. Having said that, it doesn't take nearly as long as what a lot of people think to start to build a very strong, very, what I'll say, firm self-confidence, i.e. foundation, that will never escape you going forward. And if you start to adopt this model, not only for yourself, but the people you interact with in your life, you will literally build a self-confidence model that will not escape you going forward. Okay? And that's the end of my presentation today. And I'm going to say thank you very much, and everybody have a wonderful day.